I'm Kelvin Thompson, and over the decades, I've learned a few things about effective blended course design, teaching, and learning. And I'm sharing these in a series of brief topic-focused video nuggets. Today's nugget is blended learning is a boundary object. Blended learning is a boundary object. Now, boundary object might or might not be a familiar phrase or concept with you, but I think you might recognize it more quickly than you might expect. A boundary object is something about which, in the midst of a group of people, someone identifies a concept, a phrase, and says, this is a major issue, and everyone nods their head sagely. But if you were to follow up with a detailed interview, you would find out that the reason that the people think that topic X is important varies, and their definition of what they even mean by the phrase that was used varies even more widely. The phrase boundary object itself goes back to the 1980s, and it's characterized by broad acceptance, like my little anecdote there, across a larger community, but specifics, details, structures, definitions get more precise at the local level. That's how you know that you're dealing with a boundary object. And I'm going to assert that blended learning is a boundary object. I perhaps first saw this when once upon a time I was promoting a blended learning related faculty professional development event. I sent out an email promotion. Every once in a while, when you promote something like that, someone writes back. It's always nice when they do. And a faculty colleague wrote back and said, oh, I'm so looking forward to this session about blended learning. I'm so excited, looking forward to it. By the way, what's blended learning? And I always chuckle a little bit at that, but it sort of, to me, begins to introduce the idea that blended learning does not really have a completely widely accepted definition. It's better today than it used to be, but I want to illustrate this with a little visual, a little tool for thinking that I've used for some years. I sometimes refer to this as the blended bullseye. The farther out you go in this series of concentric circles, the broader the conceptualization, the more zoomed in that you get toward the center, the more specific that we get. In my experience has been the broader that you get out to the outer side, the more general agreement that you might have. As you zoom in toward the center, the more people start differing in their points of view. And when you get right down to the center, religious wars erupt over terminology. As depicted in the visual, when we get to the sort of the mid-range point where the circles are sort of shaded, that's where we're in really pretty generally accepted territory. Not my colleague who wrote me the email back, but most people today, when we say blended learning, they understand we're talking about face-to-face and online, in person and online in some fashion. But there's a lot more specificity that can be had, and that's where people start parting company. The first major speed bump on the road is the idea of reducing the number of class meetings relative to a comparable in-person class section. For instance, if a comparable in-person class section was going to meet 3 days a week, a blended learning course section might meet in person 2 days a week, or it might meet in person only 1 day a week. And the remainder of the time, the instructional activity that would have gone into those in-person class meetings is instead made up of intentionally designed online learning experiences of varying sorts. So that's where the first wave of people deviate, and then it gets more specific from there. And people, I'll say that sometimes institutions, professional associations, state systems of higher education, or other groups might get really detailed. Uh, Percentages are used, mathematical symbols, I like to say, or really precise definitions or rules or boundaries, but they're not widely shared beyond just that immediate group. It's hard to get agreement. So that's why blended learning is a boundary object. Um, there is a deep literature around blended learning developed over the past 25 years or so. And I want to list just a few resources that I think are kind of connected, at least loosely, to today's segment. First, chronologically, we might list these out as this 2009 research article, because it makes one of the first connections that I can recall between boundary objects and blended learning. And then in the very first 2015 episode of the podcast I co-host, we invoked and unpacked the concept of boundary objects. And the show notes webpage for the episode includes additional resources that you might find interesting. In a 2016 keynote address, I elaborate on confusion around blended learning and the need for clarity. And more recently, in 2023, the Canadian researcher Dr. Nicole Johnson provides guidance in bringing clarity to digital course modalities in a monograph. So that's really it for this blended nugget segment. There's a lot more to unearth, so keep coming back and keep exploring on your own, so that we can all make blended the best that it can be.